For our lesson of Scripture, I'll be reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. Hear now the reading of God's holy word. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, Who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, But who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
In the story that Mike just read this morning, we're at a point in Jesus' ministry where it's closer to the end than it is to the beginning. Things are beginning to ramp up in terms of opposition to Jesus. He needs all the time alone that he can get with his disciples to be sure they understand what they need to know about him before he's no longer with them. So, he goes to this place called Caesarea Philippi. If the Sea of Galilee is right here where Jesus spends most of his time, and about 30 miles over this way is the coast, the Mediterranean. If you go about 25, 30 miles this way, back up in the highlands, you come to a place called Caesarea Philippi, which is not so much Jewish territory. And so if Jesus needs to be alone with his disciples, it's a perfect place to go. And that's where he heads. His days are getting shorter. He's got questions about his disciples. Is there anybody in that group of 12 that truly understands him? Is there anybody that recognizes him for who he is? Because somebody's going to have to pick up the ball and carry it after he's no longer here. It's a dramatic picture we have here. We've got this Galilean carpenter who has picked up along the way 12 very ordinary people, called them to come and be with him and follow him. And at this very moment, some very important people back in Jerusalem are beginning to actively plot how they can be rid of Jesus. He needs to know before he makes that final turn toward Jerusalem and the cross if he's got anybody in there that he can depend on. So he asks the question, who do people say that I am? And that's the story that we heard from Matthew's Gospel. And when he asked the question, who comes through? Peter always comes through. I know who you are, he says. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says back to Peter, that's right. And because you know who I am, I'm going to reveal something about you that you may not know about yourself. Who you really are, or more to the point, who you are going to be when you become fully mine. Peter's name in Greek is Petros. This is P-E-T-R-O-S. Jesus says, tell you what I'm going to do, Peter. I'm going to take your name, and I'm going to take that O in your name, and I'm going to swap it out, and in its place, I'm going to put an A. So instead of being Petro, Peter, you're going to be Petra, which is the Greek word for rock. You're going to be a rock, Peter. You are going to be the rock on which I build my church. Now that's what Jesus said. What did Peter say? Matthew doesn't record that. And I would say it's probably for two reasons. One, that he did not make a verbal response to Jesus. His jaw just probably dropped. And the other thing, the thought that was on his mind was, me, the foundation of your church? You got to be kidding. That's a thought he might have, but you would never say it to Jesus. When we say to Jesus, I know who you are. You're the Christ. You are the Son of God. That's when we come to Christ and we claim our salvation. And because we can say something like that to Jesus, Jesus can say things back to us. It's up to us to listen to what he says. And basically what Jesus says back to us is the same thing he says to Peter. You know who I am. I know who you are. In fact, more to the point, I not only know who you are, I know who you are destined to be. And so Jesus, in effect, offers to do for us what he did for Peter. Fine-tune us a little bit. Like taking the O out of Peter's name and putting an A in it and changing it from Peter to rock. God has things in store for us. We sometimes romanticize Peter. If we can make Peter big enough, then we don't have to take Peter as somebody that we might model ourselves after. If we put him on a high enough pedestal, we can basically ignore him. Peter was no prize. Can you imagine if Peter had a resume, kind of what it would look like? Well, first thing that would be on a resume would be illiterate. When Peter's story of Jesus had to be written, Peter couldn't write it. Mark wrote it. It's got Mark's name on it, but Mark didn't travel with Jesus. Mark was Peter's traveling companion, and what he recorded was a story of Jesus as Peter told it, because Peter couldn't write. Illiterate, no education. The other thing that would be on his resume would be a bad temper. Occasionally gets in fights. Just what you need where you work, isn't it? A smack down at the water cooler any day of the week. Another thing that would be on his resume, unpredictable. One of those people that kind of runs hot and cold. And sometimes we meet those people and they may have wonderful gifts, but undependable kind of flashes up on the screen, doesn't it? So if you got a resume with those kind of things on it and you had a position to fill, how far would that resume get? Well, it wouldn't get very far unless your cousin happened to be the one doing the hiring, which out in these western counties of the state has been occasionally known to happen. But on a level playing field, in today's world, a resume with some negatives like that probably wouldn't even warrant an interview. And yet Jesus did that fine-tuning to Peter, taking him in the shape he was in, with all his faults and his shortcomings, and kind of tweaked things a little bit, and said, I'm going to make you a new person, and as promise of that, I'm going to give you a new name by swapping out the O for the A in your name. And who would have thought when you look at the finished product. Here's my premise this morning. You and I are as good a raw material to work with as Peter was. We, like Peter though, need some fine-tuning. If the kitchen sink is leaking, a wrench and a quarter turn in the correct direction will work wonders, won't it? As far as Jesus is concerned, if we allow him to get hold of us in a meaningful way and to put his hands on us, there are some small things he can do that over time will make big differences in our lives. Some of the things that need to happen in your life and in my life, we know they need to happen. We know certain things need to change. But some of those things are inconsequential enough that we say, well, in due time. And we look at them and nothing happens. We don't do anything. We can't do anything. We won't do anything. Truth of the matter is, our destiny is found more in the promises of God and what God's going to do for us and with us than it is in the plans that we make for ourselves. We make some great plans for ourselves, and we put some time and energy into pursuing some good things in life. But when we look mostly for our fulfillment and our satisfaction in our own ways and our own thinking and our own doing, then at some point we're almost certain to come up short and feeling like something's missing, and something is missing. Because the things that we do on our own to take care of our lives and to live responsibly and to handle life, because that's what adults do. When you get your grown-up carrying car, you take care of things. But there's an incompleteness if that's all there is. The difference between a life that is a good life and a life that is past good, we'll call it fulfilled. It brings you great satisfaction when you think about it. It's not in the things that we accumulate, it's not the things that we accomplish, but it's in who we follow and how we follow. And part of following with Jesus is at some point not simply being in his presence on Sunday morning, but at some point it's in allowing him to get his hands on us and to do a little bit of work, make a few adjustments here and there. There are places in our lives that need that kind of fine-tuning. And most of us can identify them. Some of us have, because of what's happened to us in one place or another, we've got an attitude that needs maybe a quarter turn to the right. Some of us have locked down hurts that have kind of rusted and become corroded and created a certain amount of rigidity in our spirit and soul. And what they need is the equivalent of a little liquid wrench. You know what God's equivalent for a liquid wrench is? It's grace. It will do for the spirit what the little can of a liquid wrench will do for the things out in your garage that have rusted over. There's a direction in life, that we take, and we head out to do this, and we take our compass reading at some point, and we push ahead. And sometimes we get a degree or two off course. Well, now, a degree or two off course between here and the back door of the church is not far. It'll keep you inside the church. But a degree or two off course, if you go far enough, will really wind you up in a different kind of place. The Pilgrims, they weren't but about a degree off course, but they were heading for Virginia. They didn't want to go to Massachusetts. Horrible weather. But that's where they wound up. Because a degree off course, when it's across the Atlantic Ocean, will get you about 500 miles. Most of us, when we slow down and look at our lives, we can name a couple of things that really need a little bit of fine-tuning. And that's my invitation this morning, to think about that short list of things in your life that sometimes create a problem in your life because they've still got rough edges around them. And if those rough edges were smoothed down, there are things in life that would go better, in your life and in my life. What are those things? Don't make the whole list. But there are a couple that at any given point, if we would let God get his hands on us and do just a little bit here and there, over time, would make a tremendous amount of difference. But that requires standing still. And in the world we live in, standing still is really an act of will, because there's so much to do. When it comes to raw material, we're all great material to work with. It is just we have got to put ourselves in the hands of the one who can take that raw material and show us where we can go with it. The psalmist said, "Be still and know that I am God." God might have added, "And while you're still, stay still, so I can work on you a little." Amen?